This morning, Le'iloi Nishmas, the Kedoshim that were taken from us. I tried to find the fathers' names, and I could not find them yet. So I'm just going to list them by their names. Hirsch Goldberg, Poland. Carmel Gott. Eden Yerushalmi. Ori Danino. Almog Sarusi. And Alex Labanov. We're davening to Hashem that the rest of the passages should immediately come home safe in body and in spirit. We're also learning L'schos Refuah Shlema of Harav Yosef Shlomo ben Risha. Even in all our pain, we remember that the Eibishter is so good to us, so many chasadim, so many simchas. So we're delighted to share that Tzippa has 2 children going on shlichus this week, one a bacher to yeshiva, and one a post-sem young woman to teach children of shluchim and do other pu'ules. I don't know her last name, but Rachel shared that her grandson, Mendel Chanowitz, had a bar mitzvah in Toronto last week. And Orit Rutsky shared that her grandson, Shneur Blachman, will have his bar mitzvah on Thursday, Be'ezus Hashem. And the Eibusha should help that we should all just have simchas to share. It should be freiliche simchas, gesunte simchas, and everything b'toiv anir v'anigla. And the main simcha of all, we await with bated breath every moment. This sikha is relatively short, but so wonderful. And if you have Chayenu or a Chumash or anything at all to look into, the sikha treats the pasuk in Perek Chaf, pasuk Yutes, Parsha Shoftim, and this is Shoftim Gimel from Chelek Chav Daled. And the pasuk says, "Kisatzor el ir yamim rabim lihilachim aleha letafsa." When you lay siege to a city for many days to wage war against it and to capture it, loy sashchis es etza, you shall not destroy its trees. And this is where the prohibition of bal tashchis actually emerges from. And you shouldn't do it by lindayach olav garzen, by wielding an axe to them. Ki mimenu teichel, because you can eat from it. If it's a fruit-bearing tree, you should not fell it. You should not cut it down. And you should not cut it down. And then the pasuk turns from a statement to a question. Ki adam eitz hasadeh, is the tree of the field like a man? Lavai mipanecha b'matzar, who can in any way fight you? In other words, why should you kill this tree? It's not like a person who could thwart your efforts to take over the city. The next pasuk says, Rak eitz, asher teda kiloi eitz machalhu. But a tree which you know with certainty is not a food-bearing tree, oisei tashchis, that tree you can't destroy, the charasa, or you can cut it down, uvanisa matzar ala'ir, and with its wood you can build a barricade against the city, asher hi oiseim chamilchama, and that is waging war with you, and you could do that ad ridita until it is conquered. Okay, these are the psukim that the sikha treats. Now let's go into the sikha itself. Ala pasuk ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, hikshu b'gemara. The Gemara asks, "V'chi adam eitz hasadehu? Is a person really like a tree?" V'tirtzu, and the Gemara answers, "Ela mishum dichsiv ki mimenu teichel ba'oser lo sichreis." The reason why a man is like a tree is because it says about the tree, you should eat from it and you shouldn't cut it down. Uksiv oisei tashes v'chares, and then about a tree that is not food-bearing, that tree you can destroy or cut down. Haketzad. So in which way is a person like a tree? Is a tree like a person? Im Talmud Chacham Hagun Hu Mimenu Toichal. If the Talmud Chacham is proper, and we'll understand soon what does it mean proper, then you should eat from him. Rashi explains how do you eat from him? You should learn from this kind of person. And you shouldn't cut him down. But if the Talmud Chacham is not hagun, not proper, you should destroy him. Rashi explains what does it mean. Sur me'alav, go away from him, take leave of him, v'charas, and cut it down. V'tzarech lahavin. We have to understand. From the fact that the Gemara mirrors the pasuk's question, muchach, it proves to us shenaktu shehashvas adam because of leit hasada eina rak lefi she'eit hasada mishamish kimoshel. From the fact that the Gemara takes this pasuk and says, "Wait 1 second, let's stop and understand how is this true." This proves to us that the Gemara does not see these words simply as a metaphor or some kind of parable, but rather to be taken literally. Therefore, it wants to understand in which way do we take this literally. But if it was just a mashal lahavin achas or kama me'amalis v'atchuna shel adam, but the Gemara would not have asked that question if it was understood that this pasuk was simply an analogy, and that we could learn certain virtues, we could learn certain characteristics from a tree and superimpose them on how we understand humanity. Rebbe says in the bracket, because if the intention of the pasuk would be just to compare humanity and trees in some details, in some ways, then there would be no place for the Gemara to say, wait, what? Man and tree are comparable? Because there are a number of ways in which you can compare a tree and a person. A person has roots. We don't, just come here from nowhere. Tree has roots. A tree can give forth fruit. God willing, a person can give forth fruit of all kinds. A tree can provide shade. A person can provide protection, solace, and so on and so forth. So there are a number of ways, details in which we can compare the two. So the Gemara wouldn't have to be like, wait a minute, stop, hold on. But the fact that the Gemara says, here, Adam eats hasadeh. I'm sorry. The Gemara says, V'chi Adam ate sada who? Is that really true? Means the Gemara is taking this quite literally, and we have to understand in which way is a human being like a tree. I also just want to bring to your attention that the Maharsha says that if you look at the pasuk, it says, Ki ha'adam eitz hasada, but it should have really said, Ki eitz hasada adam hu, is the tree a person? But from the fact that the syntax of the pasuk is written in this way, Ki adam eitz hasada, it becomes not just a question, it becomes a statement. A person is like a tree of the field. Because really, based on the question that's being asked, it should have said, Ki eitz hasada adam hu. Okay, so we continue. Elasha adam hina eitz hasada. But rather, a person is actually a tree of the field. Hatoyar eitz. The description eitz, tree, mivateh, expresses loy rak protim chelkiim oitfelim ba'adam. It expresses not just singular properties or aspects of a person. Ella es kol mitziusai shel adam. Ha'adam eitz hasadeh. But rather, this describes the existence of a person. A person is being called a tree of the field. V'yesh loymar in the brackets, and we might say the Rebbe says, "Sha'adavar muvan gam mikach she'ein oimrim tachlin b'chamisha asar b'shvat Rosh Hashanah lilanos." Rebbe says, and further, practically, trees have a very singular position in the constellation of Jewish observance and custom. We see, that we have a Rosh Hashanah lilanis, we have a Rosh Hashanah for trees. We don't say Tachnun on that day. We don't have a Rosh Hashanah for fish. We don't have a Rosh Hashanah for birds. Uminig Yisrael lechol miperes ha'ilan b'yom zeh, and we have a minute to eat fruit from the trees on that day, v'chulei, etc. And the customs of Tu B'Shvat, actually the Rebbe was careful to say Chamisha Asar B'Shvat, are based on this pasuk. So there's something very serious that is being imparted in this pasuk, and the job before us, the Rebbe's explanation in this sikha, is in which way are we like a tree? Because again, if the tree was just being used as some kind of metaphor, some type of analogy for humanity, if it was just something that the Torah was saying as part of an analogy, there are other metaphors that are employed in the Torah, it wouldn't be enough of a reason for us to actually have a Rosh Hashanah and make it into Yom Tov. Move on from the fact that we do, it's understood Adam eitz hasada mashma'ik now Adam hinui eitz hasada. That when the pasuk says Adam eitz hasada, it means exactly that. That in some literal way, a man is like a tree. And therefore, there's a very important connection between the Rosh Hashanah for trees and humanity, which is why it's a Yom Tov. Okay, you could say it's a quasi Yom Tov, but again, it's a Yom Tov, and there are halachas attached to it. V'im kain ein amuvan. So this is true. Once we establish that this is meant to be taken quite seriously, then we have two questions. Aleph, Ketzad miyusheves she'elas hagemara v'chi adam eitz sadahu al yedei hatirutz im talmud chacham hagun hu mimenu teichal v'cholei. So now the Rebbe is saying, how is the Gemara's question? Wait, what? You're saying that a person is actually a tree of the field? So the Gemara questions this. So how does the Gemara answer this question by saying, well, if the Talmud Chacham acts properly, you should learn from them. If the Talmud Chacham does not act properly, don't spend time with them. It would seem that in this answer, it's actually signaling that this is just an analogy and is giving us one aspect of this analogy. And it's only one aspect of what a tree is. So the question still remains. The question does not seem to be answered. If anything, the question seems to be underscored by what the Gemara replies to the question. For this reason, a person should be referred to as a tree. Because if a Talmud Chacham acts properly, if their insides are aligned with their outsides, if they have proper midas, then you should learn from them. And if not, cut them out. That's one question. Beis, ech yitachen klal l'ta'er et mailas ha'adam min ha'medaber b'kach shu eitz hasada she'ish bo tchune shel tsameach. So here the Rebbe is referencing something that is referenced very, very often, that the world is divided in four strata, in four categories. We have the inanimate, the daimim, we have the vegetative, the sameach, we have the living beings, the chai, and then we have the human being, the medaber. So the Rebbe says, how is it in general proper to describe the virtues of a person who are the highest on this, on the categoric scale, medaber, by describing them with qualities that the vegetative world sports, that the vegetative world has? Like, how does this even make sense? It's true that there are aspects of growth, certainly in humanity, most specifically or most obviously, once a person stops growing at a certain age, but their hair and their nails continue to grow always. Aval Aleph imishum kach. If that's what you're going to go by, then at least compare a person to the chai, to the living creatures. In other words, if you're going to pick out one thing from a person and you're going to compare it to a different category, why tzemech? You should go for chai. There are so many more parallels between a human being and other living beings. And beis v'ikar, and the main thing the Rebbe says, loy zehu teichen mailas ha'adam medaber. The fact that we have aspects of our bodies that continue to grow, that's what you want to single out. That's the virtue of the medaber v'imkein. Ech matim loymar ha'adam eitz hasadeh. It seems to be such a step down, such an insult to compare a human being to a tree. Why would you do this? Base. So the Rebbe begins to answer this question in Seif Beis. Hamala hamiyuchede sheba misyachid min hatzameach biyachas lemin hamedaber v'hachai. The virtue that distinguishes the vegetative world vis-a-vis the human and the living creatures, he shahatzameach Einoi mechase umastir es chayusoi ha'amitis. It is that things that grow from the ground in the world of vegetation, there is no obfuscation, there's no obscuring, there's no shrouding of the true source. V'hu mechubar tamid, and see how the Rebbe underscores the word tamid. It is constantly connected al yedei shrashav, through the roots, lim kaire, to its source, lekayach hatzameach, to the power of its growth, sheba adama, that is in the earth, hanaisim bechayim etzmicha, and is this power that gives vegetation its vitality and its vivifying force. That therefore, semach hanitlash min hadama. So when you have some type of vegetation that is yanked out of the earth, it ceases to be tzameach, it ceases to be something that grows. In contradistinction, when you're talking about all types of living creatures and humans, we don't find that animals, birds, fish, amphibians, reptiles, human beings must be connected to their roots and their source. We don't find this kind of connection to the earth, although everything came to be from the earth. Like Shlomo HaMelech says in Kayeles, everything came from the earth. And we don't find that after animals are born, humans are born, that they cleave onto their source and to their roots that gave birth to them. Yes, of course, a very, very young human being, a very, very young animal. But in short order, we eke out our own individual existence, and we don't, stick like white on rice to those who bore us. Va'af mizoinam shalachai v'medaber eina ba'ofen hamatzrichim lias bechibur lemakar hamazain. And the way in which Hashem created the world, the nutritional sustenance of the chai and the human being doesn't come to us in a way that we have to be connected to the source of our sustenance, of our nutrition. But in contradistinction, vegetation, it's always connected to the energy and the power and its source of sustenance in the earth. Now the Rebbe says, maybe you're thinking that there is an aspect of chai that is similar. He says, however, we do find something similar to this when it comes to fish. Hamuchrachim lihimatzei tamid b'mayim. They must always remain in the water. Makar chayusam, which is the source of their life. Ukeshev parshim min hayam miyad hamesim. And when they leave the water, they die immediately. Va'adra, by the contrary, bahem inyan zeh hu biyeser says masher b'tzameach. You might think that fish is a better example of being literally submerged in your source, because they have to be in the water. They remain with their entire existence in the source of their vitality, rather than what grows, which just remains connected at one point, but is not completely submerged. But the Rebbe says, but this very fact that you wanted to say that fish are submerged in their source, that also teaches us the opposite. It is exactly this that underscores the novelty of the vegetative over even fish. Why? Because even when the vegetation grows very, very high above its source, you have vegetation that grows higher than 3 tvachim from the earth, 10 tvachim from the earth, and then you have the redwoods. Huge. Mikol makayim hu nishar tamid mechubar l'shrashav hamitzuyim ba'aretz. That notwithstanding, no matter how high the tree might grow, it always remains tethered to its source through its roots, and through the agency of its roots to its vivifying sustenance from the earth. And another thing the Rebbe says, bidagim and fish, hare kol dag prati, einay mechubar klal lemakar hachayus haprati shaloi. Every fish does not remain connected to its personal source, to where it was born. Fish swim from one place to another. Fish can even go from a stream to an ocean, or the opposite, as opposed to the vegetative world that remains constantly connected to its source. Gimel. Now, in the fact that vegetation manifests this virtue, this quality, this is even more manifest in specifically the tree over grass, over other types of vegetation, over crops, and so on and so forth. So it's more by ilanois al pnei shar hatzmachim. Smachim acherim, other types of vegetation could go into tvua, like wheat, priha, dama, vegetables, einam nisharim b'kiyumam kitzameach hamechubar la'aretz mishana l'shana. They don't remain from year to year in place. They're harvested. They're cut off. Beheim ma'abdim es mitziusam. And in being harvested, they lose their existence as a growing thing, as vegetation. Lu'umasam, as opposed to this, ha'ilanois maitzim peres mishana l'shana. The trees remain in steadfast fashion, and they give forth fruit every year. They're able to withstand all the seasonal changes, the summer, the winter, and so on, and their existence remains steady. And this fact testifies to an extraordinarily strong connection to the source of their vitality. And this strong connection to their source gives them great strength to not be impacted in a negative way by all the seasonal changes, and to remain strong and in place, and even to grow from year to year. Seif Dalet. Ha'adam hu olam katan. Every human being is a microcosm, a small world. Kashem sha'olam gadol mischalek l'arba sugim, just like the world itself is divided in these four categories: doimim, the inanimate; sameach, the vegetative; chai, the living; umedaber, and the one who speaks, humanity. Kach yeshna ba'adam af beruchniusoi arba sugim elu. And so each person has within their inner biosphere, spiritually, we have these four categories. Ukiyadua, as is known. Shahamidei sheba'adam, hein hatzameach shebenefesh adam. The midas, our characteristics, our attribute, our emotive attributes, are parallel to the tzomeach, to the world of vegetation that is found within the microcosm. Because it's specifically in the midas, in our attributes, that we have this idea of growth from something smaller to something larger. I'll just say one word about this, that, and as is going to become very clear in the Sikha, that we're born with certain midas. So call it our DNA, we're hardwired, we're soft-wired, we have certain predispositions, we have certain proclivities. That's just the way people are. So what does it mean it grows from katnus to gadlus? It means, hopefully, that as we grow older, those same midas remain in place, but we channel them for a more evolved, greater purpose. So the 2-year-old will put a lot of effort. Let's say they'll put a lot of their tenacity, the midas hanetzach, hanitzachon, into winning a lollipop or a star or something like that. And as you get older, you channel that same midah into something much more worthwhile, something much more appropriate for a more evolved, older iteration of your 2-year-old self. Okay, so there's this type of growth pattern. Now, compare this to our cognitive abilities. Here, yes, you have the same thing, that hopefully we're growing cognitively, but there's something that far eclipses this aspect, and that is elagam inin hachai. Our seichel is compared, that's the chai, that's in the olam hakatan, in the microcosm. And habalidi bitoin expresses itself bitnua v'shinui mimakam lemakim. It expresses itself in constant change and mobility and ambulating from one place to another. Kibal chayim hana mimakam lemakim, like animals that wander from place to place. And the Rebbe is going to explain, what does it mean that the seichel is chay, that it's constantly moving from place to place? Val derech zeh haseichel einoi mugdar umugdal mechubar leteva echad. Our cognition is not categorized, it's not limited, it's not connected, quote unquote, like a plant or a tree is connected by its roots to one place, to one predisposition or one natural attribute. Ki haseichel inyanei lachkar ulahavin davar. Because what is cognition all about? It's about investigating and trying to understand things. And here, very, very important parentheses, loy lefi cheshkai urtzainai. It doesn't necessarily align with your yen, with your desire. Now, I really try not to do this, but something that's very clear to me is that you could say that this is how the academy alleged higher learning has changed or lurched so drastically in the last decade or two, from a place of inquiry, right, The academy is supposed to be a place of higher learning, of objectively trying to understand ideas, but instead it's actually become a place that's more like the Rebbe is explaining the virtue of eights. Like people begin with their preconceived notion, and then everything has to conform to that. So we're not seeing, free inquiry and people sitting down and talking out ideas. We're seeing dogmas that are being passed down in the classroom as fact because these people are in steadfast fashion tethered to this particular idea. End of rant. I'm sorry about that. But it's very, very scary. Okay. So Rebbe says that seichel is supposed to be about objectivity, not subjectivity. It's not supposed to be about what you feel. It's supposed to be about actually trying to understand what is and let the chips fall where they might in terms of, are you going to feel aligned with this emotionally or not? It's supposed to be just try to understand the concept. Don't bring yourself into the equation. And sometimes when you learn something, it's going to lead you in the direction of kindness. You're going to move towards that. Sometimes it's going to lead you in the direction of gevura. You're going to be repelled by it. But you have to learn it. You have to see the emes in it. Be'inyan pliny, in one situation, maskanas haseichel, he should chesed. In one situation, you'll derive from what you understand that you need to treat this with chesed. And in another situation, if you're able to see this objectively, you might come to a completely different conclusion. In contradistinction, are midas mitzad atzman, the midas as they are mugdares lefi tivan. They are categorized. They are, by definition, skewed in a certain direction. Midas hachesed nisheres tamid mitzad atzma b'kav hachesed. V'chei midas hagvura b'kav hagvura. Chesed always remains chesed. Gevura always remains gevura. Ein zois ela shehin seimchos mikatnos legadlos. It's only that you're going to see these same midas, hopefully expressed in a more evolved, matured fashion as a person grows. But they're not going to change. Hey. Kashem shat sameach sheba'ilam gadol misyachid kanal b'malis hayusay mechubar tamid l'sharshay. So just like the Rebbe has taught us that in the macrocosm, in the world, the distinctive virtue of Tzemeach is that it remains always connected to its source. Al derech zehu b'vchinas haTzemeach sheba'adam. The same is true vis-a-vis Tzemeach within us, which is our midas. Sheyesh bahen maila ala seichel bekach, and this is their virtue over cognition. Shedafka hein mechubaros tamid l'sharshan pnimius nefesh ha'adam. It is dafka the midas that are constantly connected to their source. And what is the source of the midas? It's the innermost aspect of the person. Pnimius nefesh ha'adam. Zeu gam hatam lekach shehamidos regesh halev yesh bahen kinira b'muchash toikev gadol. And this is the reason why, as we see practically, that the midas, that our emotions, that the feelings of our heart have tremendous strength, much more than what we understand cognitively. You could understand something from today till tomorrow. But when it hits you emotionally, it's going to catapult you in a whole different level of action. But what's the flip side of this? What's the underbelly of the strength of our emotions? it is very, very hard to change midas. So the good news is that the midas are connected to our essence, and they can fuel our actions in a way that our cognition can't. The flip side of this is that it's very difficult to change midas. Al derech ha'amor le'il b'negei lanes, just like we said above about trees. Mishu ish hachesed b'tivoi kosher yila b'yosel l'shtanis l'shagvura val derech lehefach. Somebody that is predisposed to chesed in overarching manner, it's going to be very hard for them to change to become a ish hagvura. And the same is true in the opposite. Ula ha'ir. The Rebbe is always very attentive to not overgeneralizing and leaving every possibility open. Ula ha'ir, let's just mention she'afal pikein hadavar efshari. Although it's very, very hard, it is possible. Ela she'ein ze davar haragil, but it's not something that in the aggregate is the norm. It's not al derech haroiv. No, I'm sorry. Al derech haroiv, usually, average, adam misugal liskaber besichloi al teva midaisav, va'af l'shanoisa mira l'taiv. A person is able to strengthen themselves through their cognition and therefore surmount their midas and even change them from something bad to something better. Kishem shahilanes, just like with a tree, alidei tircha yisera, through a lot of effort, la'akram imkaimam ilantaya isa b'makam acher, you can uproot them from their place and you can replant them in a different place. And in that way, yitzmechu b'makam hachadash, they will grow in the new place. Uleitim af b'yeser says masher b'mkaimam arishan, and sometimes even better than in their first place. But that is not the norm. That is not what we usually do. And it requires a lot of effort. And this is the reason for why our seichel, our cognition, is not categorized by our emotive aspects. Like we see practically, a person can investigate, a person can research, they can even grasp very, very well something that is opposite of who they are naturally in their midas. Because our cognition is not in manifest manner so connected to the root of our soul. Just like the animals in the world, they don't have a constant connection to what they were born of, who they were born to, where they were born. They wander. So cognitively, we could wander. We could learn this kind of thing. We could learn an opposing idea. In fact, that's probably a very good definition of intelligence. The ability to understand different ideas, even when you don't agree with them. We can do that cognitively. Emotionally is a whole different thing. Vav. And now we have a whole different understanding of these words. Hainu, this means that generally a person is a tree of the field. Because it's dafke in the midas in the sameach of the person that is brought to be manifest the roots and the source of the Pnimius HaNefesh. V'yish loymar, might say, shemitam zeh, for this reason, Iker avodas ha'adam hi, our main spiritual service is lo kol kach be'inyan ha'sechel, ela be'ikar bevirur lezichoch hamidas. Our main spiritual service is not to flex our intellectual abilities, but to refine and to elevate our midas. And this is I'm looking for which footnote. Okay, we'll go back to the footnotes if we have time. But this is the Ikar Avoda. The Alter Rebbe says it's in Tanya. It's a famous Hayom Yom. The Ikar Avoda is to, and the Rebbe says it in the Sicha soon. The Ikar Avoda is our midas. V'lachein Adam magia lidei shleimusay dafka lidei avoda zu. And that's why a person comes to fruition specifically through this avodah. The completion of a person's seichel. And now we're going back to Pasuk and Veschanan. V'yadata, you should know. Af hi ba al yidei hashpas haseichel al midas ha'adam v'hashevoisa el levavecha. Yes, we have a mitzvah v'yadata. You should know, you should study, you should learn. But what's the highest level of v'yadata? Not to know for knowledge's sake, but v'hashevoisa el levavecha. It should impact your heart. It should impact what you do. V'zeu mashen isbara b'gemara. And this is what the Gemara explains. She'inyan adam eitz hasada nikar mizgala b'kach she'im talmud chacham hagun hu mimenu teichel. Now that the Rebbe explained that comparing a person to a tree is very profound and it's not a step down, because we were irate that the medaber is being compared to the tameach. So the Rebbe treated that. Now the Rebbe is going back to the first question he asked, which is, how does the Gemara answer its own question? Right? The Gemara says, Adam eitz hasada? Are you serious? Then the Gemara says, well, if a Talmud Chacham is hagun, if they are proper Talmud Chacham, then you should eat of their fruit. You should learn from them. If not, leave them. Now we can understand. The Rebbe says, She'im Talmud Chacham hagun hu mimenu teichel. Perish hagun hu shebetalmud Chacham zeh yeshna loy rak malas haseichel limud ela shesichloi mashpia al midaisav. From who should you eat? From a Talmud Chacham who has proper midas. And his seichel is mashpia. It impacts in a practical way on his midas. And all of his learning leads to his comporting himself in a proper way. And specifically from such a Talmud Chacham should you eat. Question, can we then say that Chabad Dafka is the way that helps us work on Midas? Yes. The emphasis on Chabad versus Chagas Chasidus, that the impact would be more real and lasting. Absolutely. Mihu Adam Bishlei Musai, She'efshar Lilmoy Mipiv. So who is the consummate person? Who is the complete person from whom you should learn? Mishahu eitz hasada, from the person that is compared to the tree of the field. Hainu, meaning shebechinas hatzameach shebe'adam hamida shaloi hi kideboi lemehave. This is a person whose sameach, whose midas are proper. Zay. Kashem shadavar amor b'chol yochid b'frat al derech zehu b'negei lechlalos am Yisrael. And just like this is true individually, this is also true on the national scale. Kol b'nei Yisrael and b'neiim shel shleishes ha'avos Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. All of us, b'nei Yisrael, are the children of the three avos, the three patriarchs, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. The kesher zeh ela avos hu ba'ofen shel chibur tmidi, and this connection is a constant connection. Like Rashi says on the pasuk, from the peaks of boulders, I see him. Rashi says, what does this mean? Ani mistakel b'reishisam ubetchilas shorshehem. I gaze at their heads at the beginning of their roots. V'ani roya oisam yusodim v'chazokim chulei al yedei avos v'imahis. And I see how they are based on and they are strong because of their patriarchs and matriarchs, their mothers and fathers. And in which way does this constant connection of every Jew to the Abbas and Imais express itself? It's not so much through the cognitive faculties. It's dafka through the emotive aspects. Kiyadua, as it's known, sheshloishes ha'avos heim keneged shloish hamidas ava yira v'rachamim klolos kol hamidas. We know that each one of the avos paralleled and embodied one of the three main midas from which the other four are actually subsidiary aspects. So Avram is the Indian of Ava, Yitzchak is the Indian of Yira, and Yaakov is the Indian of Rachamim. Ves hamidas halalu heim harishu livneihem achareihem, and they vested these midas, or they gave as an inheritance these midas to all their children ad olam, forever. Kach shebechinas ha'avos yeshnan tamid b'chol zman b'chol adam. So these aspects of the avos are found in every Jew all the time. Vatam lekachu. How is this and why is this? Inyan hayerusha negea be'etzem hamoirish v'hayerish. Because Yerusha comes from the essence of the ear. I'm sorry, it comes from the essence of the one who is giving it over to the ear. V'lachein iker masha avos hinchilu livneihem achareim ba'ofen shel Yerusha, and therefore, in the main, what the avos gave as an inheritance to their children after them, einoi madrigasam b'seichel u'b'hasagas elukus, is not their level of grasping godliness. It's not their cognition. Oh, ledugma, the Rebbe says in parentheses, for example, madrigas Avraham, the level of Avraham's cognition is seichel hanela mikol rayin, is a type of seichel that defies our ability to understand, to conjure, to imagine. Ki haseichel ein boi begoli kol kach chibor ela etzem v'hapnimius ha'ovrim b'Yerusha. This is very, very fascinating and important. On the one hand, when we speak about genetics, yes, seichel, does run through the genetic line. But what is seichel and what is it not? Seichel is not a manifest way of gauging the connection of the essence between one person and another. What is? Ela avedasam b'midas. Midas, yes. And in a footnote, the Rebbe cites a mimer. I'm going to go back later to footnotes, where seichel is a tool of atzmos, but it's not a manifestation of atzmos. Midas are a manifestation of the essence. So what did come be Yerusha? The work of the avos.
Repeat what you just said. I'm sorry, Rivky. You said seichel is a tool of atzmos, but not a manifestation.
But it's not a manifestation of atzmos. Yeah. Ava yira v'rachamim. That's what the avos gave us. Kevan sheteva hamida shalahem kashor lipnimius hanefesh. Because their midas, the nature of their midas, is connected to the pnimius hanefesh. And the Rebbe finishes up in Seif Ches, and he says, Achas ha'hirois sheyesh lilmoi bepashtos me'inyan zeh. One of the lessons that we must take away, Bepashta, simply speaking, from this Indian is the following. Makar hachayu shel Yehudi hu haTorah. Kihim chayenu. What's the source of what's our vivifying force? It's Torah. Kihim chayenu, right? Ulam seder hafayim shel roiv b'nei adam nikva al pi Torah ba'ofen kazeh she'ein hem kedogim shebiyam hamitzuyim tadir b'toich makar chayusam. It's true that the Torah is the source of our life-sustaining energy. But the way Torah set up this world, most people are not like fish in water for the rest of their lives. Most people are not sitting in yeshivas learning 24/7. Because in the aggregate, there's a small percentage of people who make Torah their vocation, who are Yeshiv Ayel, who are sitting in Kailel for their whole lives, or sitting in Shivas for their whole life. Ve'ilu roiv b'nei Adam, most people, Yitzim ela Olam shaboy aleim lemales hashlichos lases le'yizbarach dir b'tachtainim. Most people go out into this world to fulfill the mandate and the shlichus of making this world a dir b'tachtainim. Va'al kein yesh liskar, and therefore, because most people are not like fish in water, most people are in the world, quote unquote, we must remember ha'adam eitz hasadeh. We must remember that we must be trees. Al Yehudi liyos mechubar tamid lemakar chayusay. A Jew must constantly be connected to the source of her life-sustaining energy. Hachayus b'Torah mitzvahs sheyonak ba'oyelo shel Torah b'terem megia ha'es lirdaif. We must constantly be connected to the chayus of Torah mitzvahs that was our sukkah that we nursed, as it were, in the oil of Torah before it came the time lirdaif to run. This is from the Pirkei Avos, right, from the Mishnah. There comes a time lirdaif where you have to make a parnasa, etc. Svicha lishar by tamid. But we have to remember the chayus of the oil shel Torah always. At sheyargish, until we feel. Now note, not cognitively, but till we feel emotionally, shehu mechubar b'shah zu lizman hahu, that is now, not something of the past. Kiloimar, this is to say, loy sheba'ovar lamad b'cheder b'yeshiva va'ata hu zoichem ma shehirgish v'asa oz. It's not that there was a time many years ago, a person learned in a cheder, they learned in yeshiva, and now they remember what was then. Ela sheyargish ata es hachibor lizman hahu. But one must feel now the connection to that time. At sheyargish shazuhi chayusay b'shah zu v'zu mechusay mitziyosay. Until he feels that this is his life-sustaining energy now. This is his essence. This is his existence. And by the way, this is why we have to learn constantly. Because how can you sustain this without constantly plugging into your roots? Sarah's asking, can someone explain then what Tanya says that Chachma Koyachma is the point of connection to our essence, much deeper than our Midas? Are we saying that in Midas our essence is most revealed and with Chachma it is hidden? So our designated, Esther. Yeah? Esther, are you raising your hand? I was just going to call on you. Is Esther?
Yeah, it's me, but I wasn't raising my hand if that's what it looked like. I'm running to a bris.
Esther, there's a hand in your box.
Oh, really? I
Yes.
guess I tapped the wrong thing.
No, it's Alpi Hashgacha Pratis. Answer the question, please, Esther. You're the designated Tanya expert.
Halavai. Say it again. What was the question?
Can someone explain then what Tanya says that Chachma, Koyachma is the point of connection to our essence, much deeper than our Midas? Are we saying that in Midas our essence is most revealed, and with Chachma it is hidden? I'm confused.
Well, the Koyachma is where the neshama, the neshama rests, right? because it's in our mode. Koyach ma means it's the koyach, the ability, you're better at English than I am, the koyach of what? So you don't have the knowledge yet, it's empty. But that ability of wow, what is in there, because it's empty of us. It's only koyach. And in it, because of it being empty of our own pride, our own ability, or anything, that's when the neshama rests. So in that sense, it's very close, right? But I mean, I don't know, does that answer the question? On the other hand, when it comes to midas is us. You can't move your midas. You can't move the center of your body. You can move your hands, your feet, you can move your head. But your center is always there. It moves only with its feet, hands. You understand? You can't move your center in of itself. It is you. And it is true. We call, say, persons kava chesed, kava gvura, kava tiferes. But the most important element, therefore, is das. Because das is what impacts your midas. When we talk about growth, you must use seichel in order to grow. That's what maturity is, that you use your seichel. It's mayach shalt al halev. That you must use seichel to grow. But what you're growing is your midas. Are you going to be a better person? Are you going to be more compassionate? Are you going to be more disciplined? Are you going to be more generous? Are you going to be more humble? Right? Hello?
Yeah, we're all listening.
Does that answer what you're asking? Like we say, children have katnus hamaychen. Katnus hamaychen, they have small maychen because they are all into emotion.
Only children of katnus hamaychen? Wow, you must live in a very wonderful universe.
But they can't not have katnus hamaychen. It's impossible to expect different from them. It's impossible not to expect the motion to be the main factor, because the maychen isn't developed yet. But the midas is them. Right? So what grows here is the mind, the purpose. Chabad is absolutely crucial in order for us to grow our midas. I don't know if it's the water that feeds it, or it's the food that feeds it. That's what Torah is. Torah is food. Chachma is food. Bina is food, right? That's what Tanya tells us. Midas is anyway. So that's what feeds the midas in order for it to now be able to develop maturely. But on the other hand, we could use our mayach for different things. Like you said, it moves one way. That's our free choice, by the way. Where does free choice come in? In our mayach more than anything else. So it's crucial, but the things that we are trying to change, that's why if you have a machshava ra, but your midas are good, it's nicht hazeh geferla. So work on it. Right? You had a fleeting thought and it wasn't appropriate. Okay, so correct it. Much easier also. Then your midas. Midas take tremendous work. And that's our, anyway, I don't know if that answered the question. My Shaltait is huge, and that's why Das is huge also. Yeah. Because that is what connects it, our perception, our perspective. Anyway, I have to run, but did I answer? I don't know. Is that the question?
Thank you. Yeah, now you can run to the bris.
Okay.
Of Gain of Simchas. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mazel Tov.
Thank you.
Another thing maybe that we could say is in Chassidus very often we say sebenzach v'machet. It depends what you're discussing. So yes, there's an Indian that Chachma is much deeper than Midas. But I think here the Rebbe is focusing on saying that it's through the midas that our essence is exposed much more than through our seichel. It doesn't mean that in our essence, chachma is not higher than midas. Chani, it just emphasizes how powerful, dangerous the seichel can be. There are many types of seichel, but that's the only way to change our midas. Yeah, there's so much to say about this. I mean, this is why The Rebbe was very, very concerned with education, the type of education, precisely for this reason. And I would say that the Sikha also underscores why, like, what we say, what's the main thing? The main thing is to look for Yir Shemayim and Midas Tavis, right? Seichel is nice. There's all kinds of things that are nice. But what's the most important two things? The most important two things are Yir Shemayim and Midas Tavis. Let's finish the Sikha. So those that are not in the Ayel Shel Torah have to remember that they have to be Eitz Hasada, they have to be connected in a present way, not in a nostalgic way about what was once, but presently have to be connected to Torah. On the other hand, Al Yoshvei Ayel Ladas, and those that are sitting in yeshiva have to know She'ein Dai B'Limud HaTorah Levadai. It's not enough to just learn Torah. Ki b'emtzuz koyach hasechel b'vad sheba yicholim shinuyim ein ha'adam muftach shegam la'achar yitziasa me'ayla shel Torah yishar mechuber k'dbay l'Torah. Because if you're only doing this on the level of intellectual gymnastics, that's not good, because there could always be changes. Our seichel is like the chai. You could go from one discipline to another. And if you're not integrating it on an emotional level as well, then you cannot be sure that after you leave the Ayel Shel Torah, you're going to remain connected properly to Torah. It's only and specifically when learning Torah is, like the pasuk says, v'yadata, for the purpose of this impressing itself and returning to your heart and impacting your everyday activities. It's only then that the Torah becomes engraved and inscribed in the heart of the person in a way where there are no changes. And therefore, and then, if they learn Torah in such a way, no matter what their situation, no matter where they are, and no matter what will be happening, la'olam yishar kashur u'mechubar lemakar mayim chayim l'Torah u'mitzvos. The person will remain constantly connected to their source of living water, to Torah and mitzvahs. So going back to the whole idea of Chabad, one of the things you could say is that unlike other Hasidim or other Haredi demographics, if we learn properly, then yes, then we should be able to go into any situation, any geographic location, and be able to hold our own, and not to have to be, in a bubble wrapped constantly to keep the world at bay. But we should be able to confront the world if we learn properly, and if we are, like Eitz Hasada, constantly connected. That's the Sikha for today. And again, we're asking for Shlema, for Harav, Shlema Yosef Shlema ben Risha. And we're asking that Eibusha should have Rachmanis on his children and bring all the hostages home immediately. And there should be Shalom already for everyone. Tip, if you want to mute us, we can talk.
Thank you so much, Rivky. This is amazing. Thank you.
Hey, Goldie.
How are you?